Hey everyone, I'm here with Flolan.
Hello.
And what we're doing here today is discussing the IronRock, which is a very advanced iron farm that worked until the Village and Pillage update, because that of course changed everything regarding villagers. And well, this farm uses a lot of intricate mechanics and they are very well thought out. There was a lot of code digging involved. And I don't know that much about it myself because that technology is beyond me. So let's just go a little into the base mechanics of this farm, and I will let Flolan explain some of the details regarding that.
Okay, we prepared a little setup to show how villages worked before 1.10. So before 1.10, we needed a villager and a door. But this door needed to be a house, and to check if this door is a real house, the game checked the skylight axis on the two sides of the door. And if it's the same on both sides, it's not a house, because then it's just a door. But if there's a roof on one side of the door, it's a house. And this block now changes the skylight axis and simulates the roof. And now this is a house and becomes a village.
Alright, so that is how villages are created, correct?
Yes, and we can also close the villages by now removing this. We no longer have a village here.
Alright, so Flolan just explained how villagers are created, and well, that is of course not the only mechanic that plays a role in this big iron farm, because it's absolutely massive and there's a lot more involved. So now we're just going to go a little into detail about why these villagers in here and how they play a role in the farm.
Okay, to summon a golem, it's quite similar to the current version. We need 21 doors. That's not that similar because now we need beds and we need 10 villagers. That's why we have all of these villagers here. And those villagers, they don't actually need to be in the ticking area. That's why they are placed in a really specific point, and then they are unloaded and don't produce any lag while running the farm. Because we are using village stacking, which means we have multiple villages in this farm, in total 80 villages, up to 80 villages, and for all of those villages to spawn golems, we need 10 villagers. So 80 by 10 means 800 villagers in this farm.
Alright, so what we want to detail a little now is how village stacking worked up until 1.10, because it was actually a very interesting process, and it involves a lot of overlapping and all that, but I'm not going to explain that, so Flolan?
Okay, so we built this. This is just a little model to explain it, and this is of course not the real size of everything. Okay, so we have two doors which represent two different villages. And every village has a circle, and this circle is a radius where when we create a new door inside this circle, a new house that gets detected by a villager, this house or door will connect to this village, to the light blue village. And when we create a door house in the dark blue village, in the circle of the dark blue village, it gets added to the dark blue house. And to stack those villages a little closer to each other, we create two villages with two circles, and then we place the door in the middle. And now this door will become light blue or dark blue. Let's, for example, say this village, this door becomes light blue. And now, when we remove this outer door, we have two villages that are pretty close to each other. And that's how this entire stacking works. And the problem is, we don't know which village this door will get added. If it gets dark blue or if it gets light blue. And that's the entire thing about sorting all of this, and that's why we opened that many doors and villages up there, just to sort them and to guarantee that we get a light blue village here.
And so then the golems will all spawn in these water streams?
Yep. The spawning pattern needs to be super fast to remove the golems out of the checking area. That's why this is kind of complicated and uses shifting floor and bubble columns. And the bubble columns are a technique that is also used by Java players. The game will only spawn a new golem if there's no other golem inside the golem checking area. That golem checking area got removed in the versions, so that's no longer a thing, but that's why we use those bubble columns to get the golems up really quick and get them out of the golem checking area.
I see, so they spawn their head inside the slabs and then they just clip through and go into the water streams?
Yes.
Okay.
They don't need to be killed fast, they just need to get fast out of the golem checking area.
Ah, I see, okay. So the checking area would be outside of range when they are in the water streams?
Yes, as soon as they get
that's cool.
Step.
And for the shifting floor, is it the same idea but just downwards?
Yes, exactly, because we can't use bubble columns there. We need to use something different. And wasting all of those spawning spots would decrease the efficiency a lot, so that's why we use shifting floors there.
I see that's using gravity blocks right here. I think it was using sand on TechRock, not sure. But was it somehow starting to fall and that way glitching through the mobs?
Yes, exactly, but there was a problem at the chunk borders, because that didn't work, and that's why we have this gap in between here.
Ah, I see. Alright, so we are up here at the farm itself, and as you can see, there is a sign saying stand there to be automatically pushed to loot the villagers. Are you going to explain what that means?
So the villagers aren't in the villages when we create the villages, because the villages aren't in a ticking area, so they can't get added to the villages. But we need to add them to the villages once. That's why when the farm is fully built up, we get pushed one chunk forward, loading all the villagers, and then we get pulled back. So we loaded all the villagers once, they got added to the villages, then it's done. And we don't need to load them anymore to spawn columns.
Alright, and there is a lot of ether hopper clocks around here and lots of timings. And I'm not sure if that's related to the warming up of the farm, but the farm needs to warm up before it runs at maximum efficiency. So maybe go into detail how that works?
Yes, we have a problem because doors and villages, we stack them and we need to open and close villages, and closing villages takes 1 minute. And that's why we have a timer that takes 1 minute, and after 1 minute we start a cycle again. And the cycle is controlled by an upper hopper clock that opens the right door in the right time. And after 1 minute we start the whole sequence again. And then we have this complicated roof where we open this, where we add the 21 doors one after another. So we send a pulse to this roof, and then we add one row of 21 doors, and then the next time the pulse comes, we open the next row of doors, and so on.
Alright, so changing this skylight axis using the water is what affects these rows of doors down there?
Yes, exactly. And then we have some villages to detect it, and that's how we get all the doors to spawn the golems.
So we are here at the top of the farm, and you are seeing a bunch of villagers bridged out from the center, and in every of those pods there is a villager, it seems. And well, these serve a specific function, but again, I am no expert regarding that, so, well, I will let the experts talk.
Okay, so when the farm is building up, we create these villages. In total, that's 12 villages, 6 up here and 6 down at the bottom. And those 12 villages all get created by pushing up the block, changing the skylight axis, and pushing up the villager to detect the door. And then close afterwards, we again we move down the villager and move down the skylight axis to close the village again. But that takes 1 minute, so we have 1 minute time to further process this village, or those 12 villages. And because we need those 12 villages and not only one village, because there's only a certain chance that we get a right village, because some villages don't work for stacking. So we need to sort out which village is the right village, and that's why we have another villager with another door, and this villager, and it activates this villager. We grab one of those 6 upper villages and move it a little bit further down. And when this villager with this door move the right village a bit down, we have some more doors with another villager in this blue part here. And this blue part will move the village that's right and that is sorted out further down. So it is in range of all of the other doors. So the other doors can connect to these villages. So to sum up, we open 12 villages and then we sort them down and then we pull them down, and when they are in reach of all the 21 doors, then we add 21 doors to the village and close all the other doors, and then we have our village in place.
Alright, that makes sense. So, is that also the reason why this farm has a 110-minute build-up time, because the individual villages need some sort of adjusting?
Yes, because those 80 villages, they need to all do the cycle I just explained. So every one of the 80 villages needs to open up the village at top, then in the middle, then a bit further down, and then the 21. And then we need to wait until all the doors at the top close. And then we can start the next cycle. And that's why we need this build-up time. And closing a village takes 1 minute, and that's why this is quite a long time.
Alright, so this farm, there is 80 villages, well, up to 80 villages, and every one of those villages has a chance to spawn a golem. However, this farm does not simply produce 80 times the amount of ingots every single village produces, and maybe you can explain why that is like that, Flolan?
Okay, so there are multiple issues why this is not super efficient. So the first problem is with the golem checking area. When there's a golem in this farm, in the bubble columns, then there's no other golem can spawn around that golem. And the bubble columns are super fast, but still not fast enough for the golem production we have. That's why it's not that fast. And then we lose some spawning spaces with the shifting floor design, because we need room for the pistons and the tripwires, and therefore we lose some spawning spaces and reduce the rates of it. And then this farm can go up to 80 villages, but normally it averages at about 78 villages. And that's because, how I already talked about, opening 12 yes, 12 villages, and then sorting them to get a good village. But there is a chance that all of those 12 villages aren't good villages, and they are all bad villages. And then we can't sort them, we can't process them further, and then we won't create a new village. And that's why we not get 80 villages every time.
Alright, so there is also the maximum rates of 2300 per hour after the build-up, and it could be higher if the villages would not have these problems associated that Flolan just explained, but because these problems do exist, that's why it's limited to 2300 per hour, correct?
Yes, that's why it is. And you could also always stack more villages, and with more villages, you get more iron. And that also goes up linear because those problems, they don't increase. So the golem checking area is already maxed out here, so it doesn't increase by getting slower. So the more villages, the faster it is, and that's actually a linear after a certain point of villages.
So this farm, of course, is very specifically timed, and there are various mechanics involved with that, but in order to achieve that, we had to go into some coding. Or I say we, but I wasn't involved at all. It was mainly Earthcomputer and SupremeMortal, along with Flolan, and maybe you want to explain how that worked out?
Okay, so SupremeMortal and Earthcomputer did some coding, and for a long time it was actually thought that village stacking wasn't possible because in Bedrock Edition the village update order was random. But Earthcomputer and SupremeMortal found out why it is random and that it's actually not random because everything in a computer game is not really random because a computer can't get out random numbers. And the randomness comes from a hash set. A hash set is a list where all the villages in a world are stored. And when a door opens, it will try to connect to a village. And when there are multiple villages around that door that it can connect to, it takes the first village it gets from that hash set that is close enough to connect to. And that's how we do the entire sorting. And this hash set is in FIFO order, so that means the first village that gets in is also the first village that gets out, which in reality means the door will most likely always link to the latest village. But there's this thing that a village, a newly created village, could land into a bucket of an, and then the new door won't connect those to the latest village because it's in the bucket of an older village, and then therefore will also take at the same time with the older village. They also figured out how this hash set worked, and that's how we could make this really reliable and work with most of the villages. And to get the timings right and to actually debug all of this farm, I wrote a mod that could give me real-life information about which villages we have in the world currently, and which villagers are in which village, and which doors are in which village. The mod works with the Linux launcher of the Bedrock edition, and the Linux launcher is by Mr. Arm.
Alright, and that Linux launcher basically allows to load some additional mods, and that's how you got real-time information instead of having to rely on tools like MCC Tool Chest or Universal Minecraft Editor, correct?
Yes, the mod was really simple. It's more or less, it just gives me information when a function was called and what this function was used to. And that's everything the mod did. And currently, the symbols got removed from the Android version of the game, and that's why the mod isn't working anymore. And why this is no longer possible to make, because we need symbols for that.
That's also part of the reason why we can't really make these cool tools anymore that easily. There's still some that exist, but yeah, I think that's mostly using the BDS software, right?
Yes, because we still have the symbols in the BDS.
So that was a lot of explanation and funny mechanics when you listen to all of those, because it's actually not quite that simple. It's very complicated, and well, all those mechanics are pretty much useless or not present in the current updates. It still is a very important part of the Bedrock tech history, because, well, as you may be able to tell, a ton of work went into developing this. So, well, yeah, that is very complicated, and I think it would be quite a shame to not ever show that to the world. So thanks, Flolan, for explaining.
Yeah, no problem. You're welcome.
And well, thank you so much for watching, and see you around.